When the schedule was announced for both India's tour of Australia and Pakistan's tour of Australia, there was a feeling that perhaps, if only, we would have seen an India versus Pakistan clash in Australia. Because if you look at it, the stage was set for an India versus Pakistan clash in Australia. Look at what happened in 2022. By November, both teams are there. Pakistan are playing 3 ODIs and 3 T20Is. India are playing 5 tests from November onwards. Could Cricket Australia have squeezed in a bilateral or a triangular series? Because Cricket Australia were really serious about hosting it. Looking at the bilateral tensions that exist between India and Pakistan, you very well know that they'll only play in global events. The last time they played a bilateral was 12 years ago. Now, why did Cricket Australia pitch in with the idea, and why do you think it could not be worked out this time around? Well, Cricket Australia CEO and Cricket Australia's head of scheduling have both given their verdicts on it. Cricket Australia CEO just outlined what was the plan, because Cricket Australia wanted to host India versus Pakistan. It was subject to a BCCI PCB approval, and then the bilateral games or a triangular series was proposed at the MCG. The Melbourne cricket ground, if you look at it, has been a site of two very important India-Pakistan clashes. Number one, India versus Pakistan in the World Championship of Cricket in 1985, and after that, 37 years later, you had the iconic T20 World Cup match at this very venue where Virat Kohli hit 82. But at this point, the scheduling had to be worked out in a proper way, but the schedule was so watertight that they could not fit it in. But Cricket Australia did have an idea about it, because CA's CEO, Cricket Australia CEO, was keen on a bilateral series, a 3-match bilateral series only at the Melbourne cricket ground. But head of scheduling wanted a tri-series. India, Australia and Pakistan. Remember, the last time that happened was in the 20th century, 1999 to 2000, at that particular point in time. That time you saw India, Pakistan and Australia play the tri-series. India won only one game, and Pakistan versus Australia in the final, where Australia were dominant. Ind versus Pakistan, as I had mentioned, the last bilateral was 2012, but after attacks that happened on the army soldiers in India in both 2016 and in 2019, it was decided that yes, India and Pakistan will not play bilaterals, they will only play in major multi-nation events like the Asia Cup and every ICC event. But a neutral venue for hosting India versus Pakistan bilaterals might once again rekindle something that happened in the 80s and the 90s on a regular basis. But head of scheduling in Cricket Australia wanted a tri-series. CEO was keen on bilaterals. But when the schedule was announced, no way could there have been a crossover. The schedule was just too much to take, and that's why 5 tests, 3 ODIs, 3 T20Is, the white ball leg will be only against Pakistan. For India, it will be Australia for 5 tests also. Now, as I had mentioned, in that India, Pakistan, Australia tri-series, it was in 1999 and 2000. India already had a torrid time, losing all the 3 tests against Australia and winning only 1 game in that entire international summer. That too against Pakistan in Adelaide. If you look at ODIs in Australia, India versus Pakistan, they have played each other 8 times. India has a 5-3 head-to-head record. India beat Pakistan in the World Championship of Cricket twice in 1985. Then in 1992 Sydney, they beat them in the World Cup there. But then after that, Pakistan won 3 out of the 4 encounters in the 99-2000 tri-series. India's only win came in Adelaide. And if you look at it, about 15 years later, in 2015 World Cup, Virat Kohli's century ensured that it was 5-3 ODIs, this is I am talking about. Now, India versus Pakistan, as I mentioned, no bilaterals, Asia Cup, ICC Champions Trophy, ICC World Cup, ICC World T20, only in those places you can get to see them. But a neutral venue, this is where 90s kids who have grown up will really familiarize with it, because why did Victoria, why did Melbourne want to host the India-Pakistan bilaterals or the tri-series, wherever it was going to happen? 2022 T20 World Cup. The capacity crowd at that time was over 90,000 just for that game alone, and it was the biggest crowd puller. Gate receipts, whatever you want to look at it, Cricket Australia benefited in a massive way. And that is why Melbourne was considered the venue for the bilateral series. It is the crowd puller, and only Melbourne had the capacity for it. Because if you look at Perth, Optus, sure, but 70,000, there the capacity would have been low, plus timings also would have worked. Adelaide, capacity is low. Sydney and Brisbane, yes, heritage, but unfortunately, they don't have that bigger capacity. Only Melbourne with over 1 lakh. That is why Melbourne was chosen. But unfortunately, the schedule could not have been worked out. And if you have to look at it, India versus Pakistan is actually a neutral derby. If you look at the entire history of it, this one could not be worked out because how will you fit in from November to January? Remember, February 2025 is the Champions Trophy. Until that period, you have to play all the games. How on earth could you fit in that? So that's why this particular idea could not be worked out, but Cricket Australia is serious. Maybe not in 2025, maybe in 2026. A bilateral series in Australia. Pak play 3 ODIs and T20Is in November, India play 5 tests. So the crossover could not happen. And as far as a neutral derby is concerned, India versus Pakistan, can you believe it? Out of the 135 ODIs that these two teams have played each other, 77 have happened in neutral venues, with Pakistan holding a 40-34 advantage. World events since 1985, they have been playing on all neutral venues with the exception of 2011, and if you look at the Asia Cup in 2008. But for all us 90s kids growing up, that Sharjah tri-series, the Sharjah quadrangular, India-Pakistan would always happen in Sharjah, and from 1996 until 1998, you would see 5 ODIs being played in Toronto at the Toronto Skating and Curling Club. Pakistan won the first series 3-2, India won it 4-1, but Pakistan once again got back the initiative. And that is why India versus Pakistan is indeed the neutral rivalry when you have to look at it. They play most of the games only in neutral venues because of the tensions that exist. So, would you like to see an India versus Pakistan bilateral in Australia? And if in Australia, which is the venue? Melbourne is the preferred choice, but you want it in Perth, Adelaide, Sydney or Brisbane? You can write to us in the comments below, and if you want to add which year should it normally happen or should it happen at all, you can write to us in the comments below. Thank you so much folks for joining us for this video. We'll be back with more updates on Sports Straight. Tap that bell icon so you know when we go live. Bye-bye.